It's really important that our people see us and the messages that we convey as being honest, transparent about how it impacts their lives, because people trust us to come here and work here. They trust us with the responsibilities they have in their families and what they need to do to be developed and to be able to have the career progression that they hope for.
Hello and welcome. Today we have someone truly exceptional joining us, and I am thrilled to introduce JC Lapierre, who is the U.S. Chief Strategy and Communications Officer at PwC. But let me tell you, she's not your typical corporate executive. She's a powerhouse of innovation and a force for positive change. JC is the brains behind PwC's strategic masterpieces, the driving force behind initiatives like the Trust Leadership Institute and the game-changing New Equation Strategy. And if that's not enough, she's also a key player in PwC's CEO Action for Diversity and Inclusion, which is making waves in the business world. In 2022, she earned the well-deserved recognition as the PR Week Woman of Distinction and the Outstanding In-House Professional of the Year. But beyond the accolades, what sets JC apart is her passion for making a difference. So grab a cup of coffee, kick back, and get ready to be inspired. We're about to dive into the fascinating conversation with JC, and I can't wait to share her insights and journey with all of you. Welcome to the Care to Lead podcast, the show that dives deep into the art of communication and leadership, bringing insights from the foremost thinkers and corporate trailblazers. JC, it is an honor to have you with us today. Is there anything that I've missed in your intro?
Oh gosh, no, it was so generous and kind, and I am thrilled to be here with you today.
Oh, we're so glad to have you. In your Authority magazine feature, you mentioned the illusion of transparency as a communication pitfall. I'd love that, and I'd like to unpack that a little bit more, if you don't mind. Tell me more about that.
Yeah, it's something that we focus on at PwC all the time, and I think there's a path where you say we want to be transparent and you create this illusion of transparency, but not the actuality of transparency. And then there is being transparent, of course, within boundaries, because you can only share so much with different audiences at different times. And for us, it's really important that our people see us and the messages that we convey as being honest, transparent about how it impacts their lives, because people trust us to come here and work here. They trust us with the responsibilities they have in their families and what they need to do to be developed and to be able to have the career progression that they hope for. And so for us, we are incredibly focused on how can we make sure that you have that trust. And that's more the word that we often use in transparency. It's to build trust, so that you know what we're sharing with you is what will allow you to develop, to create that future for yourself that you've entrusted us in coming to work here.
So obviously, I'm an executive leadership coach, and I work with C-suite executives all the time. And one of the things that they run into when it comes to transparency is the fact that there are things shared within that C-suite that they cannot yet be transparent about. So what is your take on that, and how should a C-level executive team share information or give their team members enough information to say, hey, trust us, we're working on this, but we can't share right now?
I think about so much of what we do as the why, what, how. And I think that in so many ways in how we communicate, whether personally or professionally, in thinking through that framework, and are you spending enough time in each of the areas? And it's a learning that I had personally, because I made the mistake of not doing it in that order and spending too much time in the how of something without really spending enough time in the why. And what we really try to do is to bring everybody along, not just our people, but all of our stakeholders, not necessarily with the tactics or the how we're going to do it, but the why we need to do it. And when we talk about our strategy right now, which is called the New Equation, our why is because what companies need now more than ever is to be able to build trust with their stakeholders, and second, to deliver sustained outcomes. when you really spend time on the why we're doing that, why we believe companies need that, why that will help us serve our purpose, then I think that goes a long way for having employees understand directionally where you're going to go without understanding each and every step that you're going to take underneath it. And so I don't think of it as there are things we're not telling them. It's that we are walking down the road of our why, and that will continue to unfold as the world turns and twists, and as we continue to think about how we help our clients deliver trust and sustained outcomes, and the way in which we do that in continuing to add more value for them at a cost competitive price. And that really breaking down and spending the amount of time you need in that really helps to solve for, again, that trust issue of thinking you're doing something that we don't know about.
Absolutely. That's a great answer to that. And in that answer, you alluded to a personal experience that you had that kind of drilled that lesson home. Are you willing to share more about that?
Well, I like to think about companies as people. I actually believe companies are living, breathing organisms and no different than humans. You grow and you evolve and you make mistakes and you learn and you get better. And some days you do well and some days you don't do as well. And I think that's no different for companies than it is for humans. And I think that when I was in my 30s, I got divorced and I had been trying to have children and had challenges doing that. And I found that in going through that next set of figuring out who I wanted to become, I didn't know all of the how, but I knew my why. And so when I really sat down and spent time with people describing what my why is, there were activities that I didn't do. Like I was no longer married and I don't have children, where a lot of people that my friends and colleagues do, but I have a really strong why. And that just allowed for such a deeper understanding of where I was in life. And now I try to connect with people on their why, not sort of the how they're doing it as much.
I love that. When I have a career transition thing I do with people, and I always start to say, stop thinking about what you want to do for the next decade and really focus on who you want to be for the next decade.
Same, for sure. Exactly. Your purpose. It gets back to, like I said differently, what's your purpose? And are you clear on what your purpose is? And I believe you then have to share that with others. Like we're the ones living it each and every day, and you can't expect others to know that, but it's really important to bring people along on the journey of how you want to live your purpose, how they can help you live your purpose, or challenge you. Are you doing it well enough? Or how can I help you be better at living that purpose? And opening up that conversation and that communication channel can be so powerful, whether personally or professionally.
I'm sure in your career, as you come up through the ranks, you probably had plenty of opportunity to mentor people. Have you ever had to, or not had to, but were able to help someone else discover their purpose, uncover what that purpose is? Because a lot of times they don't have a clue.
Yeah, I love it. It's one of my favorite things to do. I like to consider myself like a quasi-psychologist, although don't tell anyone, I'm not like an active practicing, but it was what I studied in school. And I just think motivation, human behavior, why we do what we do is so important, and being conscientious and intentional about it. So one of the exercises I do with people who want to just get a little bit of clarity around what is their purpose is something that I do for myself. Every year, as the calendar changes, I sit down and I go real deep about 5 areas of my life. And those areas are 1, family, 2, friends, 3 is work, 4 is other self-interest, like outside interest, like a gym, volunteering, the kind of thing. What else do I do for myself? And the 5th is that concept of legacy or purpose or whatever word exists. And in that evaluation, I think about, what did I do well this year? What did I not accomplish or do as well that I wish I could have done better or that I might want to roll forward? And then for the year ahead, I set an intention of how much time I want to give to each of those disciplines and what learning I want, or what do I want to be able to say at the end of that year. And then I actually put a schedule in place that allows for that. Like if I decide that I really want to dedicate more time to my friends in that year, what does that mean? Like, how am I going to go about doing it? How can I make sure that I create the space to allow that to happen? And what's coming out? Because as much as we all like to just pack more in, like something has to come out. There's a finite number of hours in the day. And I think that when people put that plan on paper and they look at that wheel of the 5 dimensions, but then they look at the intentionality and the real, how do I then bring it to life? It helps them start to see what they want their purpose to be for that part in time, for that moment in time. And I also tell people, like, you don't have to figure that out forever. Figure it out for a period of time, and you can come back to it and keep refining and building on it and making it better. Whether those 5 dimensions are the same for everybody can pick which dimensions it is that are the primary factors in their life. But I think just really spending time on that exercise can be incredibly helpful.
I totally agree with you. And I also think that what people don't always understand is who they are today, sitting in their career, in their life, in their world, is not the same person that they were 20 years ago or 15 years ago when they chose this career and this life. And so taking that time, like you said, every year to reevaluate those things, because you're moving forward on this path and you got to make sure it's the right path.
Completely. And again, I think it's also to give yourself grace for the things that you choose not to focus on for the year ahead, but not to then set the expectation that you will. I just took a year off from working out. Like I gave myself grace and I said, I am not going to work out for a year because I need to create space for another thing that I wanted to do. But then I give myself grace and I don't give myself a hard time for whatever may come from not working out for a year, not feeling as strong or as fit and whatnot. And again, to me, it's the intentionality and the choice of those things. And then really moving forward with that, again, for a period of time until you reflect again.
I feel like the lesson, a key takeaway in what you just said is you give yourself the grace, because so many people will make a choice and then beat themselves up and feel guilty and go into this downward spiral. So it takes courage and it takes character to say, I'm going to just give myself the grace here.
I completely agree with that.
So you also advocate for listening to understand instead of listening to respond. It's funny, I had these big signs I do on virtual workshops that says, listen to understand. And then I just got rid of them when I redid my spin up my office. But tell me more about that from your perspective.
Yeah. And it ties to that personal story that I just shared with you, but then I'll bring it into a work context. So when I got divorced and was on the journey to figuring out who I wanted to be and how I wanted to live more intentionally, one of the questions that people often asked me that just made me flinch, it just was a visceral reaction, is when people say, do you have kids? It's a very well-intended question. It is. I am not saying that because I think otherwise, but when you go through the personal experience of trying to, and you have challenges with that, it becomes a real issue that just tugs at you and I can't control it. And what I said to myself is, how can you ask questions in a different manner so that you don't unintentionally create that situation for anyone else around you that you feel when that question comes in? And it actually set me on a journey of spending about a year learning how to ask better questions. And in that year, I read a bunch of books on how to do it. I studied and I used to keep like a pocket list of like 30 different truly open-ended questions. And I had one technique that I love, and I practice this at work often. And I found it really allowed me to show up differently and to engage and add value differently. I would not allow myself to make any declarative statements until I had asked 3 questions of somebody when they would come in and talk to me. And I would put my hand under my leg and push up against my leg. Okay, there's 1 question. There's 2 questions. And I just found that I realized I had not been asking enough questions of people. And somebody who loves to jump to solutions. I do love solving things, but really asking questions to understand is an art. And it's a skill set that is so valuable. And I think it honestly is felt when people approach you in that way.
I've done a very similar exercise with leaders, and it's really hard for them at first. And it's like, I can't think of any questions. I can't think of it.
Yeah.
I'm like, just be curious. Genuinely be curious about the other person.
Yes, Ted Lasso. I don't know if you watched Ted Lasso, but one of his things is to be curious, not judgmental. It's one of his phrases throughout it. And I just think curiosity is so valuable and wonderful.
You talk a lot about authenticity and vulnerability in leadership. And I'm really excited because pretty much everything you've said so far is like so on par with everything that I've done throughout my career and my thinking. And when I read about your words on authenticity, it reminded me of when I first started my business back a long time ago, my tagline, it was like Cynthia Corsetti coaching, and I made it like authentic leadership for analytical minds or something like that. And I showed it to one of my engineer friends, and he said, "The hell does that even mean?" He goes, "None of us care about authenticity." And I realized it was how you use the word authenticity and how it's not a tagline. So I'm really anxious to hear your insight on authenticity because I had a lot to learn about it when I started coaching.
I love that. And I actually would love to hear some of what you've learned over the years. For me, I think authenticity is being able to share that which perhaps makes you feel a little bit weaker, perhaps makes you feel a little bit different, perhaps where you did not succeed. It is being willing to tell the stories that didn't go according to plan, that aren't your highlight reel from social media. It is about opening up that dialogue and proudly sharing that that is your life experience. And then you invite others to do the same. And when you connect at that level, I think then the productivity of that relationship is just be so much more. And for me, showing up authentically, one means that I show up the same way no matter who you are. Like no matter what situation I am in and no matter who the person I'm engaging with, I show up the same way. There is no different way about me. But the other is my willingness to share stories about my life. And that's hard because at first I thought like, I shouldn't talk about myself. I should invite others to talk about themselves. And I don't want to feel as though it's like Stacey's story. I do think when you're in a position of leadership, so it actually is a responsibility to open up in that way, because I don't think people will do that unless you invite them to the table to do so. And you have to do that by demonstration, not just through words.
So I would love to get your take on, because I've watched through the years, I've seen leaders who go overboard in trying to show vulnerability and almost oversharing and making people uncomfortable. So could you talk about that a little bit? What you've seen in that?
Yeah. It's so hard. It's such a good point. And I think we've all seen examples of that as well. And what I really love and what I try to think about with everything is intent and execution, right? I love the intent. Like the intent is there. The intent of the person is to open themselves up and to be vulnerable. I think in execution, that's really hard to figure out what's the right line and how is it relative to the situation of the circumstance that you're in. And I think you have to carefully consider the audience that you're going to be in and make sure, what I would say is that you don't run before you crawl, before you walk. I think that there is a natural order to how you learn to do things and how you grow into things, whether as a team, as your business unit, as an organization. And so oftentimes what I find is in those moments, people leapt. They really ran real fast. They ran a marathon before they actually tried to just do their first mile and as a team. And that's with that audience to bring them along. And so a big part of it is how you grow those muscles and do them incrementally so that you do it in a more paced manner in the execution.
I love that. How would you encourage someone to maintain professional boundaries? What would that look like from your perspective?
I think that's so unique to the individuals and I think to the team that you're working with. And I believe that the first place that you start with is the values of an organization. So I think that that's the common binding factor amongst everybody within whatever context it is, right? Whether it's a sports team or whether it's your school class or whether it's at PwC, like the values are that thing that brings us together and binds us. So I tell everybody, you have to abide by the values. Like that is the thing that brings us together. That's the thing that binds us. Then within the team that you're in, I believe you should talk about it and create the rules of the road and what are the contexts within which people are comfortable working in. And if it could be something as simple as like, are we okay swearing or are we not okay swearing? And is that okay for this team or is that something we should refrain from? I think you have to allow for flexibility and for teams to come up with what works within that. But you always have to stay true to your values and making sure that you are operating under the values of the whatever V4 system that you're in.
That's a great answer. And that makes me think about the concept of communication debt. I think kind of fascinating. Would you like to elaborate on its implications for team morale and productivity?
So I think that, think about, we're an accounting firm, right? So part of what we do is accounting. So I'm always thinking of credits and debits and how much do you have in the bank and how much do you really focus on building up those surpluses so that you can take advantage of where you might need to withdraw and where you might need to do other things. And so I think it's really important to, whenever you can, and when you're in somewhat of a steady state with people, to really focus on building your bank with others and making sure that you are checking in. And one of the things that we really try to do at PwC is two-way communications and a ton of listening. Just making sure, because I think that's one way to learn where you stand in that communication debt, or are you in like a better place? And so we really try to listen in informal ways and with all different audiences to see where our standing is and then address accordingly. And then honestly, I say this in the right way, but to take advantage of where needed. At times when you have a really high bank and you need to focus on a different group and you can draw down a little bit, that's okay. Like that is a choice. But you have to know where you stand. You have to make sure that you're always evaluating the strength of and how you're doing with each of your different stakeholder groups. And then your forward strategy should go accordingly.
You have a lot of communication skills, obviously. So as you reflect on your own personal journey, what communication lesson took you the longest to learn?
Oh, gosh. I'm probably still learning a few, to be honest.
We all, right?
Yeah, I think we're all learning a lot. I'll start with one that I learned early on, but that I think still I'm always trying to work on. It's the impetus for why I'm always trying to work on communication. So when I was in college, I loved to read as a child. I was not as interested in playing with other people. I just wanted to read books and I wanted to have adult conversation. I think actually I was always meant for business at a young age. But I took a lot of English classes and I was talking to my mom in college and I sort of got in a habit of trying to show all of the big words that I knew in one run-on sentence. And, my mom at one point said, "You do know you sound like an a-hole, right?" And I was like, what do you mean? And she said, "The point of speaking is to be understood." She said, "And when you speak the way that you do, like you're not being understood and you just sound like an a-hole." And it was such an important and really like just a moment where I understood how important communication is, how sensitive it is, how individual it is, and how actually the more you learn, the more you have to focus on simplification and how to keep it really simple, because we all can get caught up in our life experiences. We all can get caught up in there's so many new tools and there's new like things every day. But what I keep coming back to and what I still struggle with right now in this, let's call it I'll call it post-COVID, regardless of, what your belief is and where we are in that life cycle, is how do we communicate to be understood today and know where sources of truth are? And I think that that's really hard right now in today's landscape. And there's so many channels available. And I think there's more of a desire to move towards digital channels than the old school. Like, when's the last time you pick up the phone and have real meaningful phone conversations with your friends? And so right now, I think that the one that I'm still struggling with is, how do you communicate most effectively by respecting people's time and keeping it simple for this moment where we are right now? And the other, I'll just add one more thing, is to keep the optimism in it. I think there's so much negativity right now in the world, and a lot of us versus them are choosing a side. And I love to see, and I would love to work on how to focus more on unifying messages with optimism and strengthen them that help people, but that are true and authentic. And I just, it sounds like motherhood and apple pie, but for today's day and age, that's what I think the world needs desperately. And so that's something we're really trying to focus on here.
And I think that what I'm hearing, and it's really resonating with me as well, is as a leadership coach and what I do, and communications coach and person, that what you do, we always have a responsibility to do what you're saying. It's not just a good thing to do. It's our responsibility as the people that are out there helping to grow leaders and helping to get that next level of leaders ready. That makes sense.
I love that. And I think, thank you for taking my very long answer to the last question and bringing it to that. I think that if you get to hold the pen, and I do hope that everybody feels like they get to hold the pen to their life, but if you get to hold the pen for an organization, it is an awesome opportunity and it's a real responsibility.
What do you see as some key considerations for leaders to keep in mind to ensure that their message is not just heard, but acted upon?
This is an awesome one and something that I love. I think that it's a version of making it personal, but you have to invite people to want to come on that journey. And you have to really create the way in which they can act on it, where there's something in it for them. And I'll give you an example of what we're doing here at PwC with respect to the topic of AI. AI is a big topic. You can't go anywhere without talking about generative AI these days. And every company is focused on, how do you take advantage of this wonderful tool to create time, to make us more productive, to show up for our clients and customers in different ways. It's also massively intimidating for our people because the fear of what it might take away from them. And what we wanted is for people to understand, like, we have to get on board and we have to use AI to be able to serve our clients in the way that we want to. So in order to try to minimize some of that fear, we said, we're going to upskill all 75,000 people. Like, we're going to all go on a journey so that we don't become intimidated by or think more about the fear of it or the potential takeaway, but actually we all get to be a part of the opportunity of it and create skills that are going to be necessary for anywhere you go in life, whether it's with us or if people decide to go elsewhere. And so I think that keeping messages focused, and you can't have too many messages in an organization, but picking and choosing the few things, and then inviting your people and creating ways to allow them and inspire them to come on that journey with you.
That's awesome. And how do you envision the evolution of corporate communication, like in the next 5 years? Because you're right, things are changing. We're even noticing when you look at social media now, like LinkedIn, you can see people just copying, pasting right out of ChatGPT. Like, that person did not write this. And so we're big on authenticity and we're big on being vulnerable. It's really easy to lose our sense of who we are. So how do you see that in corporate communication?
Yeah. I think that corporate communication is going to become so much more important in the years to come. To your exact point, a lot of the tools that we're talking about will make a lot of things more rote, standardized. The one way that I said it is a giant regression to the mean to make us all average, right? But what's going to rise, in my belief, is experience. And the communications function is set up to be one of the organizations that can create the experience on top of the layer that we all need. And you have to have that stuff that we've talked about, of course, but creating unique experiences for your employees, for your clients and customers, for other stakeholders, I think that will be the differentiator and those that will emerge. And because communication sits at the center, is often the giant dot connector, it is the strategy executor. It's going to be up to communications to work with teams to help create the experience and how you deliver that message and how you bring that strategy to life. And I think it's just massive upside opportunity for communications professionals.
So it's kind of a disruptor, but it's a positive. You can use in a positive way. So on a lighter note, can you share with us one of your favorite communication hacks that has served you well over the years, either personal or professional?
This is such a good question. One of my favorite communications hacks, I am a little bit more of a traditionalist when it comes to communications in terms of hacks. I will say that every Sunday night, I go through and I text every one of my friends to check in on them. And that's a personal one. And it is in that spirit of wanting to ask them how they are and how I can help them. And also just share a little bit about myself and allowing me to help them achieve their goals and hopefully them to help achieve mine and what I have set out. But I think that the consistency of communication, and it's really easy on a Sunday night when you're just watching TV or just getting ready for the week to just check in with everyone.
Mm-hmm. As I'm binge watching Suits, I can.
Yeah. Oh my God. I love that show. It's such a good show.
Yeah, me both. Okay. And finally, for leaders looking, not every organization can have a communications guru working for them. So if you're a leader in a smaller company and you're in charge of the world there, what would you give them? They want to use communication as a tool for building corporate culture. What's one piece of advice that you give them as they start out to do that?
Such a great question. To include others in crafting the message. I think to really help to create the best message, you need multiple perspectives and people at different levels of the organization. So to have like a core focus team that helps you take those key messages and translate them into what could be the most heard for your stakeholder, for your audience. And I have a core group of people that we go to often that help us do that, even in an organization our size. I just think it's so important to bring in others and to not try to go it alone.
That's great advice. And hopefully people will take that. I'd like to encourage people to reach out and connect and follow you on LinkedIn.
Yeah, absolutely.
Anywhere else you'd like people to be reaching out or following you?
LinkedIn is great. And if they want to know anything about PwC, certainly to come to pwc.com.
Okay. This interview will be uploaded right into your article as soon as it's ready to go, and people will be able to get your contact information there, have a link to your article, and we'll also put it in the show notes here. So I want to thank you so much for your time today. I enjoyed speaking to you very, very much. And is there anything else you'd like to add before we wrap up?
Oh, first, I just want to thank you. And I would just come back to what we said about communications professionals, just having this awesome opportunity to be the voice that helps to unify, to bring that positivity and optimism into a world that can be a little bit tough these days. And so I'd love to challenge all of us to rise to that and help each other and share ideas on how we can do that.
And you're a perfect role model for that. So
thank you.
Thank you for that. Okay. And with that, thank you very much